It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video, and today I'm going to talk about Viseron. In the past, we've talked about some other really great NVR systems. We've talked about iSpy, we've talked about Shinobi, we've talked about ZoneMinder, we've talked about just so many different ones, Frigate and others. And today I was introduced to this one when I did my last video kind of recovering Shinobi, and I wanted to check it out and show you guys what it's about. So we're going to go through it, we're going to get it installed, and we're going to look at all the features and things that it has. Now, when you look at it and when you read about it, they'll even say it's a little bit basic, but I mean, it's got a lot of really great stuff. It's got object detection, motion detection, face recognition, image classification. I mean, all kinds of really pretty cool features, in my opinion, that doesn't make it sound too basic. And of course, where's the first place that we like to go? The documentation. So that's where we're going to head, and we're going to get the installation going right after this.
I want to say thank you to all of my subscribers and all of my patrons over at Patreon. Seriously, you guys make this so worth it for me to do these videos every week. I really truly enjoy it, and I just can't say thank you enough. If you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. Let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job by subscribing to the channel. Plus, you'll get notified when I have new videos coming out. And finally, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, give it a like. Just click on that thumbs up, and that way YouTube knows that you like it, and they'll pass it along to other people that might enjoy my content as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you again. Let's get started.
Installing Viseron is not difficult. You just need a few different things, and we're going to go through that. So if you click on the documentation, there's some really great documentation. They tell you all about the notable features, so really great to see that. To show you some screenshots of what it looks like, and this really is what the user interface looks like whenever you get your camera set up. This is not specifically like a live view with 15 frames per second. It changes about every 6 or 7 seconds from what I can tell, so it updates kind of slowly, but you can click into the live view to see what's going on live on any of the cameras at any time. And then the recording section is pretty self-explanatory. That's where any of your recordings are going to be shown. So if we jump over here to the installation part, first they tell you the different types of systems you can install it on, which is great. So first they tell you the different types of installations you can do. So they've got ARM-based chips, which is great. So multi-arch, they've got a multi-arch image. They've got ARM-based chips for ARM64, AMD64, AMD64 with CUDA support. Then you've got your ARM version 7, so probably your Raspberry Pi 2s, things like that. And then again, your ARM version, your ARM64. So this is really more for Jetson Nano, and this one's really aimed at the Raspberry Pi 4. So as we go up, it's really simple to get to the instructions you want. Just find the architecture that you're looking for. So in my case, it's a 64-bit Linux machine. Now if you have a Linux machine with VAAPI, or a 64-bit Linux machine with an NVIDIA CPU or GPU, then you'd want to choose one of those. But in my case, I'm just going to do a regular NVIDIA or a regular Linux machine, 64-bit. So they give you Docker and Docker Compose. I love Docker Compose. It makes it very easy to get things going, restart, update, stuff like that. So I'm going to use that one. I'm just going to highlight and copy. And then back here in the background, I've got my terminal open. So I'm going to go to my system that I want to install it on. And once I'm logged in, I'm just going to clear this out so you can see it. And I like to create a folder structure that makes it very organized and easy for me to back up my Docker installations. So if you look, if I do an ls of my Docker folder, you can see I've got a different folder for every application that I'm running in Docker. And inside of these folders, I have the volumes that are mapped that keep track of the data that I want and persist it. I also have the Docker Compose files inside of here and any configuration files. So when I get ready to back this up every night, I have a script that creates a zip file of this Docker folder and everything that's in it. And then it backs everything up to my NAS storage, and that really helps me feel better knowing that I could bring this back up very quickly if anything devastating ever happened to this server. So in order to keep that structure, I'm going to do mkdir-p docker, which is that parent folder, /Viseron in this case. So I'm just going to give it the name of the application I'm going to run. So what this says is make a directory, and if this directory here, Docker, already exists, just use the existing one. But if it doesn't exist, create it. And then it does the same thing for the next step. If Viseron already exists, just use it. If not, create it. So it really does a couple of things in one little step. So now I can cd into docker /Viseron. There we go, there's nothing in there. I'm going to do nano docker docker-compose.yml. This is going to create this file and let us edit it. And now I'm just going to paste in that Docker Compose text that they gave us. Now they give us a little bit more, so if we go back to our instructions, if we scroll down below this section, they tell you about group identifiers. So they give you the Docker command and the Docker Compose for both of those as well. And there's a little bit of extra that they installed, that they set up right here, and it's just so you can identify your user and your group ownership. So I'm just going to grab that bit right there. I'm going to copy it, go back to my system here. I'm going to paste it in right there. Now I happen to know that my user ID and my group ID are 1000, so I'm good there. We're going to go up here and change a couple of things. So where these curly brackets are at, you need to change this to an actual path on your system. So I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to change this to /recordings. And what that says is keep the recordings in the folder where I have this Docker Compose file. So again, I like to keep everything together, but if I wanted more storage space, if I didn't have enough storage space on this machine for some reason, I could mount an NFS share or a Samba share and tell it to record there. You just need to give it the path on the left side of the colon to wherever that mount is. On the right side, you don't ever want to change this. This is what the container expects. So same thing for the config. I'm just going to keep everything together. So I'm just going to get this curly brace out of here. I'm going to do /config, and again that says, the / says in the folder where the current file is at, this Docker Compose file, put a config folder and map it to the containers /config. So again, you don't want to change this right side. This is the container information on the right. On the left is your host system, so you can change that. The /etc/localtime, you can just leave as it is. And then on the ports, just in case if 8888 is not free on your host, you can change this port on the left side. You don't have to, but you can. So I'm going to change this to 8541 just to show that I can change it. But again, on the right side, you don't want to change that port ever, unless you know what you're doing, you're a developer, you're making code changes or something, but really don't change that port on the right side. After we've made all our changes, we're going to do Control-O and Enter, Control-X, and then I'm going to show you real quick how to get your user ID, just in case you don't know what it is. You can do ID space -U space and your username, and you can see mine is 1000, and then we can do ID-G space and my username, and again we see that it's 1000. Now if you got different numbers, you'll want to go back into this document with Nano, make note of what those numbers are, and you'll want to come right down here, and for your user ID you'll want to put it in the UID space. You'll want to change this number to whatever it was, and the same way for the group ID. Once you're finished, hit Control-O to save, and then Control-X to exit. Okay, so Control-O, Enter, and then Control-X. And the reason I do Control-O is that it leaves me in the document. I can still keep editing, but I can save as I go along. The next thing we need to do is pretty simple. We just need to run Docker Compose up-D, and then I like to do 2 ampersands Docker Compose logs-F. So this is really 2 commands. This first one says bring up my Docker file, like download the image, start the container, and run it in the background as a daemon. Then it says do a second command here that says show me the logs for what's happening once that thing's running. So I'm going to hit Enter. It's going to go out and pull down everything. Now this is pretty big. This is about a 1.5 or 2 gigabyte download. So be patient while it downloads. It does take a little bit of time, and you do want to have some space. If you're running this on a Raspberry Pi 4, you need to use probably a 64 gig SD card, or you need to have some external storage set up, because if you're using like an 8 gig card, you're not going to have any space for your recordings really. So you can see that it's starting up Viseron for the first time, and once it starts up for the first time, you're going to go in and you're going to go to your browser, and you're just going to open up a new tab, and we're going to go to the IP address of the server that we set this up on. Now if you're doing this on the machine that you're in front of, you can go to localhost. In my case, I am not in front of that machine, and I'm going to go to port 8541. Now if you left it 8888, then you would put in port 8888. We're going to hit Enter, and you should see the loading screen for Viseron if everything worked correctly. Now it's just going to keep doing this because you haven't set up any cameras yet. So if we go over here on the left, and extend this, you can see that you've got a nice menu here, but we need to go to this configuration file. Now, one of the things I'd love to see them do is take this and actually turn it into more of a form and maybe put in some OnVIF support, because today they don't have OnVIF support. One of the things I know I'm going to need, and one of the things you might want to add, is one more line that says FPS, and we'll just set that to 15. Now, you can set this to whatever the frames per second are for your camera, but my cameras have a special setup that we need to do, and I'll show you one thing that they suggest doing for Viseron as well. But first, I'm just going to give this a camera name, so I'm just going to backspace out anything with the angle brackets. You're going to just backspace out of here. I'm going to call this driveway SE, and you can capitalize that if you want to. I'm just giving it a name. And then we need the IP address of the camera, so I happen to know my camera's IP address and my camera's port number. And I'll show you a different way to do this in just a minute. I'm just going to get rid of all these angle bracket things here. And then the username and the password. So you'll need all these things for your cameras, most likely, if you're going to use the RTSP streams. So what they suggest using is what they call a secrets file. So we're going to go back into our terminal here. Now we can hit Control-0 to get out of the logs. And if you'll do an ls, in fact, I'll clear this, you'll see that we have this config folder that was created whenever we started this up. That's great. That's what we want. So we're going to just cd into that config folder, and if we do an ls, you'll see there's our config YAML file. So that's the same file that we're editing right here. So we can do it in either place. It's really up to you. But we need to create another file. So we're going to do nano secrets.yaml. Make sure you have it just like this, secrets.yaml. Hit enter, and we need to put a few things in here. So this is a key value pair file. So we're going to use username : so you would put in the username for your camera. So if your cameras if you've set up credentials to access the camera feeds, you'll want to put that in. So I'm just going to say admin to start with. Password, again, you would just put this in for whatever your camera is. So if I just said my camera password was password, which it's not, but that would be a terrible password. Don't do that, please, but just be aware. So also make sure you spell things correctly. There we go. The next thing you can do is the IP address. So you can call this driveway _SE _camera _IP, and then put a colon and put the IP address of your camera. I know mine is 64. And then let's put the port number. So port. Now if your ports on your cameras are different, you'll want to give these unique names here. So you might put something like driveway cam port or something like that, just so you can tell it from the others and use it that way. But I'm just going to put port because all of mine use the same port. And that should be it. We just want to make sure we have one space right there below it. We're going to hit Control-O to save, and then we can do enter, and then Control-X to exit. And now we're going to go back into our config file over here, and what we're going to do is do hashtag secret, and then I'm just going to put in driveway SE camera IP. I want to use that name that I actually put in that file. And then I'm going to do exclamation point secret. I hope I said that the first time. It should be exclamation point secret, and then port. The path, a couple of my cameras have different paths, so that's why I didn't set up a secret for that, but it's H/H264. Let me get it right. Preview _01 sub. So this is my sub stream. I want to use this for my actual streaming because it can get pretty heavy. Now if you want a higher definition stream, you can use main, but just be aware it will be pretty heavy. And then here for the username, I'm going to do exclamation point secret and username, and exclamation point secret and password. So before I save this, I'm going to go actually update my username and password to be the correct values, and then we'll come back and we'll save it and we'll see how things go. Alright, I've updated those passwords, that username. I'm going to hit save right here. And now you see this restart button. I'm just going to click on that. We're going to verify that we want to restart. You'll see it start spinning. It's going to pop this guy out. As soon as it actually gets it restarted, it'll go away. You'll see that it comes back, and now we can go back to our main screen here, and you'll see this one's not going to work because we haven't set up camera 2 yet, but this one should load up with a actual image here in a second. There we go, and it is early morning here. So we're going to do live view first. But you can see what's going on there, so that's great. We can just close this. It's kind of foggy on the lens. It's very hot here, by the way. So if we want to change something about this, we can just go back here, and we can actually do, just go here and hit configuration. And if we scroll down, there's a little bit more to this configuration file. So first, you can just add more cameras, just like this. Just add another section. You can actually copy this section and just change the name of the section. So you can separate your cameras out. You see how this has camera 1, camera 2, and so on. You can name this whatever you want. This doesn't have to be camera 1, camera 2. As you go down, it starts setting up the object detection. So they've got an object detector, they've got the cameras, they've got camera 1. Frames per second is 1. So we're going to change this to 5. I find 5 is a little bit better personally. And we're going to change this one to 5 as well so that we can set up a second camera later on if we want to. We're going to keep coming down. So here they're setting up person detection, and they're setting up the confidence that it's a person at 75. I find that this works okay with one of my cameras. I've tested with another camera and it doesn't seem to pick me up. I'm not sure if it's the angle of the camera, the height of the camera, what it is, but I need to test, kind of move this number around and see if it'll work better. But I, of course, have to move it, go outside, test it, come back, move it, go outside, test it. It's a little bit of a process there. Trigger recorder true. So this was what this, detecting a person is what will trigger the recording. As we come down, we've got motion. So it's got the MOG, motion detector, camera 2, frames per second. We're going to say 5. And then we can actually come here and just go in and put in another camera. And FPS 5. So we'll put both cameras under the motion detector. And then down here, it ties everything together by saying we're going to set these up. And we're going to set them up for the NVR, which is the network video recorder, camera 1 and camera 2. So as you add cameras, you'll want to come down and add those other cameras to these sections and add them down here below as well. And that should get everything up and running. So once you've made those few changes, you're just going to click on Save. And again, we're click on Restart, Confirm. Give it a second to spin. Should pop out that little toast message if we didn't make any mistakes. There it is. And once it goes away, we should be set. We can hit the little Viseron eye there, and we can wait for the image to come back up. There we go. There's my RTSP stream just starting. Now this only updates about every 5 to 7 seconds. It doesn't matter what you set the frames per second to. But if you come back to the live view, this should be updating a little bit faster now. There's not a lot of motion going on at this time of night, so we may not be able to see much. But this is my car, plant out in the yard, just a place where water runs off whenever it rains. So we've got a lot going on there. So what I'm going to do is close this one. And I'm going to open up the one that I set up for testing because it's got 2 cameras set up. So this one has 2 cameras. This is my backyard camera, and then this is my camera out there on the driveway. And if I go to the recordings, so here you'll see that I've got a few recordings, and if you click here you can see all the recordings for that camera. So you can see a few different ones here that I got yesterday. So you can see me here just opening and closing the doors on the car, kind of testing some things, walking away from the car. And then if we go here, you can see I just came out walking from the backyard over. So yeah, I mean, picks it up pretty well, picked me up pretty quickly. As soon as I came into frame, it picked me up. Now this one, I believe I came walking from underneath and it didn't pick me up right away, but it did pick me up eventually. Here, it's got my wife getting in and out of the car, going into the house. So if I go back to my different cameras here and I go to the backyard one, I walked through this frame a lot yesterday and it just never picked me up. For some reason in the middle of the night it picked up a moth that flew too close to the camera, So I don't, again, know if the camera is just too high, if it's at a weird angle, why it's not picking things up. I need to tune that a little bit, but I did want to kind of talk about that. So the other part that I don't see yet, and I'm looking through their documentation to try to find, is how do I get rid of videos? Can I get rid of them automatically? Will it delete them for me after a certain amount of time? So we've got our object detection, our motion detection. We've got post processors. So it's got facial recognition, which is interesting. I haven't had a chance to play with it yet, but also image classification. So it can try to classify images. Now, if you have a GPU, you saw that there were a couple of different ways that you could use those to make this a little bit less intensive on your system. But since it doesn't run streaming all the time, it's pretty low resource usage from my testing so far anyways. So also pretty useful. Here they talk about the secrets file. So I kind of showed you how to set that up. And then we're pretty much done. So they've got the installation instructions, and that's kind of it. It doesn't ever talk about how do you get rid of old video automatically, or do you just have to go in and delete videos as you realize they're no good. I don't see anything automatic to do that yet. It's a pretty nice little system, pretty clean, pretty easy to use, like I said. So from here on the left you can jump to recordings and get to the recordings of both cameras. You can go back to your camera feeds, but of course these are not live feeds exactly. They do change, they do update. There's not a lot of motion going on, so you probably won't notice it right now, but they do change about every 5 to 7 seconds from what I've noticed. So you can see entities. So this is kind of, to me, everything that's happened in the camera system over a certain amount of time. So it gives you an idea of what the confidence level is when it sees something and whether or not it decides to record, which is pretty cool. So that may help you tune your cameras a little bit. So I'll go back through these logs as well and try to figure out, did this give me something useful or not? I don't think there's any kind of secretive data here that you shouldn't have or shouldn't know. Nothing that I can see immediately anyways. I don't see the password being displayed or anything, so that's good. They've got links to their GitHub, to the documentation. So they've got a link to the donations. If you want to donate, you can go out there and do that as well. I think if you click on their GitHub, it should take you to their GitHub page here. Yeah. And usually they've got links to their donations from their GitHub pages as well. It'd be really great. Yeah, here you go. So it'd be awesome, you know, to be able to see, like, how do I automatically delete recordings after a certain amount of time, things like that. There are scripts that you can do to do that as well, but just be aware. Nothing like that built in that I see yet, so something you may want to keep an eye on if you use Viseron. So that's it. This is Viseron in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time. It's your open source advocate, and I'm back, and I've set up a store with a little bit of merchandise. I love being your open source advocate, but I want you guys to be the open source advocates with me. So if you want to, get out there and get some of this stuff. And if you do, let me know what you think of it. Thank you for subscribing.